History is full of disasters, cities destroyed by earthquakes, forests consumed by fire.
It was an uncontrollable force of nature, consuming everything in its path.
Entire towns washed away by floods. Those tragedies make sense. We understand how they happen. But on January 15th, 1919, something happened in Boston that should have been impossible. An entire neighborhood was devastated by something people saw every single day. Not gunpowder, not explosives, not poison, just molasses. A thick, sweet syrup used to make food. Yet within seconds, buildings collapsed, steel twisted apart, horses were thrown through the streets, children disappeared beneath a wave no one believed could exist. 21 people would lose their lives. More than 150 others would be injured. For years, people searched for an answer. Was this simply a terrible accident? Or had the warning signs been there all along, ignored, until they finally became impossible to ignore? Because the real mystery...
This tank is leaking everywhere.
...isn't that molasses killed people. The real mystery is how an industrial disaster announced itself for years, and still, no one stopped it. To understand what really happened, we have to go back to a cold winter afternoon in Boston. January 15th, 1919, Boston's North End. It was just after lunchtime.
But on the waterfront, a disaster was bubbling.
The worst of the winter cold had eased, and for
docks.
the people on Commercial Street, it felt like an ordinary afternoon. Workers returned to their jobs. Children laughed and played outside. Horse-drawn wagons rolled through the narrow streets. An elevated train rumbled overhead, just as it did every day. Families rested inside their homes. Shopkeepers served customers.
Fresh bread for you. Enjoy the day.
No one was running. No one was afraid. Towering above this quiet neighborhood,
It was a completely ordinary afternoon.
stood a steel tank nearly 50 feet tall, holding almost 2.3 million gallons of molasses. For 4 years, it had become part of the landscape. People walked past it every day without giving it a second thought. Children played beneath its shadow.
This big tank pays our bills, kid.
Yeah, if it doesn't drown us first.
Workers ate lunch beside it. To everyone nearby, it was just another industrial storage tank. No one imagined that inside those steel walls was enough weight to destroy an entire neighborhood. Because danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it stands silently in plain sight until the day it finally moves. And then the tank made a sound that no one who heard it would ever forget. At first, it was only a low rumble. Some people thought an elevated train was passing overhead. Others paused, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Then, the steel tank began to groan. Metal stretched under enormous pressure. The riveted joints started tearing apart. One after another, the sharp cracking sounds echoed through the neighborhood. Like rapid gunfire, people looked toward the tank, but they had already run out of time. Without warning, the massive steel wall burst open. Nearly 2.3 million gallons of molasses exploded into the streets, releasing more than 26 million pounds of crushing force. This wasn't syrup slowly pouring from a bottle. It was an industrial collapse.
Eyewitnesses later described seeing a dark wall racing toward them.
Some felt the ground shake before they saw anything. Others were hit by a sticky spray and turned around, only to see an enormous wave swallowing everything in its path. Near the tank, the first surge may have reached 30 to 35 miles per hour. Windows shattered, steel plates flew through the air, buildings were ripped apart within seconds. An ordinary street had become a disaster zone. The question was no longer, why is the molasses moving so fast? The real question was, once that wave reached you, how could anyone possibly escape? The wave wasn't just carrying molasses, it was carrying steel plates, wooden beams, bricks, broken wagons. Everything the tank destroyed became part of the flood.
Run! Get out of the way!
What began as syrup had become a moving wall of debris. Inside a nearby building,
Take the children! Pull them inside!
workers heard
Pull
the
'em
explosion and rushed for the exits.
Go, go, go!
But before they could reach the doors, the molasses smashed through the windows and flooded the rooms. Some climbed onto their desks, hoping the wave would stop. It didn't. A resident named Robert Burnett heard a deep roar, followed by a powerful rushing sound. When he looked outside, he saw what looked like a dark hill rolling straight toward his home. His family tried to escape downstairs, but within seconds, the staircase had disappeared beneath the molasses. Their only chance was to climb higher toward the roof. In another house, Martin Clougherty woke to a violent crash. Before he understood what was happening, his entire home had been torn from its foundation. His mother, Bridget Clougherty, was trapped beneath the collapsing
Mother!
wreckage. Outside,
I can't move.
horses struggled desperately against their harnesses. The more they fought, the deeper they became trapped. By the end of the day, it was clear that the victims hadn't all died the same way. Some were crushed by collapsing buildings. Some were struck by flying steel. Others suffocated, unable to free themselves from the thick, rising molasses. The wave had done its job. Now, the real nightmare was just beginning. For most disasters, the greatest danger comes with the first impact. This one was different. The wave that tore through Boston lasted only moments, but as it spread across the streets, it began to change. The freezing winter air quickly cooled the molasses. With every passing minute, it became thicker, heavier, harder to move through. People who had survived the initial
Keep
wave
moving!
found themselves trapped inside it. Every
Anyone
step
there?
demanded enormous effort. Clothes soaked with syrup became painfully heavy.
Hold the line! Pull together!
Hands slipped instead of gripping.
Help! We're coming!
Feet refused to lift from the ground. Some survivors were pinned beneath broken timber, collapsed walls, or overturned wagons. Even those who were still alive couldn't free themselves. Rescuers faced the same nightmare. Police officers, firefighters, naval cadets, Red Cross volunteers all rushed to help, but they couldn't tell whether they were stepping onto solid ground or onto hidden steel, deep holes, or trapped survivors beneath the thick brown surface. Every rescue became a race against time, not because the molasses was still moving, but because it had stopped moving. The wave had knocked people down. Now, it refused to let them get back up. But one question still remained. How could something this dangerous have been standing in the middle of a neighborhood for 4 years? The investigation uncovered something disturbing. The tank hadn't failed without warning. It had been warning people. almost from the day it was built. The massive steel tank was completed in 1915 to store molasses arriving by ship. It stood in the middle of a crowded neighborhood, surrounded by homes, businesses, a firehouse, and an elevated railway. If it ever failed, thousands of people could be at risk. Yet one critical fact shocked investigators. The tank had never been properly tested under a full load before being put into service. Soon after it was filled, it began to leak. Molasses dripped through the steel seams so regularly that local children reportedly collected it in buckets. Residents heard strange noises, deep groans, metal creaking, and the tank visibly shuddering. They complained. Workers noticed it too, but nothing meaningful changed. Instead of fixing the structure, the company focused on hiding the symptoms. The leaking seams were sealed. The tank was painted. It looked better. It wasn't stronger. Over time, everyone became used to the leaks, the sounds, the shaking. What should have been treated as emergency warning signs slowly became part of everyday life. Today, safety experts have a name for this: normalization of deviance. When a dangerous problem doesn't cause an immediate disaster, people gradually stop seeing it as dangerous. And that's exactly what happened in Boston. The tank remained standing for 4 years. Many believe that proved it was safe. In reality, every passing day may have been bringing it one step closer to collapse. By January 1919, the tank had already spent 4 years leaking, creaking, and carrying enormous stress. Then, it received another massive shipment of fresh molasses. The tank was now almost completely full. At the same time, Boston's weather changed. After days of intense cold, the temperature suddenly rose. The fresh molasses entering the tank was warmer than the older syrup, already inside. That rapid change, combined with the enormous weight, may have increased the pressure inside the weakened structure. Some experts have also suggested that gases produced during fermentation could have added even more stress. But it's important to understand one thing: the weather didn't destroy a safe tank. It only exposed an unsafe one. A trigger and a root cause are not the same. The trigger may have been the final filling, the warmer molasses, or the changing temperature. But the root cause was years of poor design, inadequate testing, and ignored warning signs. Yet even after the disaster, the company refused to accept that conclusion. Instead, it offered a completely different explanation, one that shifted the blame away from engineering and onto someone else. In the hours after the disaster, Boston was in shock. The streets were covered in debris. Buildings had collapsed. Steel plates had been thrown across the neighborhood. Many witnesses described hearing what sounded like an explosion. The destruction looked so violent that one question spread almost immediately. Had the tank actually exploded? The company quickly offered its own answer.
It was an act of God, pure and simple.
It claimed
No one could have foreseen this.
the disaster wasn't caused by engineering failure.
6/8 of an inch.
Noted. Let's check the next ribbon.
Instead, someone had sabotaged the tank with a bomb. At the time, the theory sounded believable to many. America had just emerged from World War I. Political unrest was rising.
Extra, extra! Read all about the Great Flood!
Anarchist attacks were making headlines. Fear and suspicion were already part of everyday life. If the tank had been bombed, then the company wasn't responsible. The weak design wasn't responsible. The years of leaks weren't responsible. The warning signs weren't responsible. It was a convenient explanation. But investigators needed more than a theory. They needed evidence. And when the evidence was examined, the bomb story began to fall apart. The answer wouldn't be found in newspaper headlines. It would be decided inside a courtroom. The disaster lasted less than a minute. The investigation lasted almost 6 years. More than 100 claims were filed. Victims' families, injured survivors, property owners, railway officials. Everyone wanted to know who was responsible. The hearings brought together engineers,
The wall just gave way.
company
The
officials,
standing structure was insufficient.
workers, eyewitnesses, and technical experts. For 341 days, they examined every piece of evidence. The steel plates, the rivets, the leaking seams, the tank's design, its construction, and the warnings that had been ignored for years. One question stood above all the others. Had this been an unavoidable tragedy or a preventable failure? The evidence pointed in one direction. The tank had never been properly designed, never properly tested, and never properly repaired. Most importantly, investigators found no convincing evidence that a bomb had destroyed the tank. In 1925, the court reached its decision. The disaster was not an act of sabotage. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company was held responsible for the collapse and ordered to pay damages to the victims. But the verdict did more than end a lawsuit. It sent a message to every engineer, every company, and every industry. If you ignore warning signs, you don't just risk a structure, you risk human lives. Today, it's hard to imagine that one of America's strangest industrial disasters happened here. The giant steel tank is gone. In its place, there's a quiet public park. Children play, people walk their dogs. Baseball games are held just a few steps away from where the tank once stood. For many, the Great Molasses Flood has become little more than a bizarre piece of history, a strange headline, an unusual trivia question. Some even repeat the local legend that on hot summer days, you can still smell molasses in Boston's North End. Whether that story is true or not, it isn't what matters. Because behind every headline, behind every legend, were real people, workers who never returned home, parents who lost their children, families whose lives changed forever in less than a minute. The Great Molasses Flood wasn't remembered because it was sweet. It was remembered because it exposed how ordinary people can pay the price for extraordinary negligence. And more than a century later, its most important warning still hasn't grown old. More than a century has passed, but the Great Molasses Flood still asks the same question. How does a disaster become inevitable? While everyone watches it happen, the answer was never hidden. The tank leaked, it groaned, it shook. People noticed, workers complained, residents raised concerns. But because nothing catastrophic happened, the warning slowly became normal. And that may be the most dangerous mistake any system can make. On January 15th, 1919, Boston wasn't destroyed by molasses. Molasses was only the material inside the tank. The real disaster was built through poor engineering, rushed construction, inadequate testing, ignored warning signs, and the belief that if something hasn't failed yet, it probably never will. History has repeated this lesson in factories, bridges, buildings, and industries around the world. Major disasters rarely appear without warning. Most announce themselves long before they happen. The question is whether anyone chooses to listen. The Great Molasses Flood is remembered as one of history's strangest disasters, but it shouldn't be remembered because the streets filled with syrup. It should be remembered because an avoidable tragedy was allowed to become inevitable. Sometimes, the deadliest thing in a disaster isn't the force that destroys everything. It's the warning that everyone learns to ignore.